Welcome, everybody, to Utah Story Show. Thanks for joining me. So on the program today, the theme of the program is those who are stuck. In the 40 or 50 homeless interviews I've conducted, it's kind of surprising, I suppose, that there's nobody out there who wants to stay out there. There's nobody on the streets who's living there thinking, oh, this is just great. I can just sit around, do drugs all day, and just lie here. And it's no, they certainly do not think that it's a great situation. And I think some of the people who walk past and yell out things like, get a job, you guys are so lazy, what are you doing? Don't quite understand that these people are stuck. And the surprising thing is, they aren't primarily stuck because they don't have a house. They're primarily stuck because they've got felony convictions, they're alcoholics or drug addicts, or they've been priced out of the housing market. And they want to get unstuck. And so what we're doing today is we're looking at a few people a little bit later on in the program who are stuck, and we're going to go into the reasons why they're stuck. And then we're hoping that we can have homeless advocates and leaders come on the program to acknowledge what their problems are and what the possible solutions are. Because some of these problems are pretty basic. Like, one guy is stuck just because he doesn't have an ID. He said, I would love to get out there, get a job. He's a young guy in his 20s, and he just wants to get back into housing, but he cannot get an ID because he has zero documentation. So I'd like to know, how do we get these people unstuck? So we're going to be going into that a little bit later in the program. But first on the program, we have with us Robin Pendergrast again from the Getty Images and New York Times photographer. He's been stationed out here in Utah for quite a while. He passes photos along to bigger media news outlets such as the Washington Post and New York Times and Time Magazine. He's been out here covering mostly what's going on with the homeless situation. We did a previous story, just him talking about how appalled he is by how inhumane the treatment is of the homeless people. Robin, thanks so much for being on the program.
I'm glad to be here again and an opportunity to catch up.
Yeah, lots happened since we last spoke. I saw you invited me to go to the abatement, which was absolutely just awful and horrific to watch and actually witness. You've been to, how many abatements have you witnessed now?
Oh, maybe 20, 25. I lost count.
I'm gonna have you pull this right up.
I've been tracking even more than that through some of the contacts that I've developed, like Stacy and people like that are well known in the homeless community. And there was one as recently as a couple of days ago where a number of homeless were picking up on the island, which is to the west of Rio. And even today, which is Friday, I was down. I started with 16 cases of water, and my car is empty now. Wow. Just driving around in some areas, 700 South, where there's quite a collection of folks in the homeless community, or maybe near the Rio to the west of there's a whole concentration. They just gravitate back. It's like a game of checkers.
When I first started covering this from the small business owners on Main Street,
yeah.
The reason why I was covering it is because I'm just witnessing Main Street, downtown Salt Lake City, dying, especially the local part of it. Like the City Creek Center is fine, but where Sam Weller Bookstore was, that whole area is being overtaken by homeless, and I think your knee-jerk reaction is, get out of here. Why are you here on the street? And the reason is they literally have no other place to go.
You're right. And Richard, there's not in my backyard is kind of it's worn out from the standpoint of and I saw it today again, the dramatic increase in numbers. It's unbelievable. And the nature of what I do, I remember faces pretty well. And I'm seeing more and more and more new faces showing up from who knows where. But the important thing is, and particularly after the last 9 or 10 days when we had plus 100 degree heat, I've really been out uh, picking up my donations, water from Trader Joe's, that type of thing, to make sure these folks stay hydrated. And this is when I get a really good fix on the expansion of pods of homeless folks, not big encampments necessarily. The police and the mayor and everybody, they go after those right away. But there's individuals, or two or three together, that are existing over on 600 East or 700 South or at the Rio south of Gateway, or I can sit here and list these all day long. Particularly the day today at the Rio was, and I've got images that I'll be sharing with you, was a bit mind-boggling when I showed up with a couple of cases of water, which is all I had left. And there must have been a couple of hundred people lined both sides, but particularly the west side, where they could find shade.
People?
Oh yeah,
Wow.
easily.
Wow.
And the shade, which has become a prerequisite for people hanging out, particularly from noon on, is critical. That's why they're banked up against the west side, up against the fences. There's a construction site now, but they still are looking for any place they can go to hang out.
What is the most common reason or story you're hearing as to why these people are homeless and stuck now?
Well, God, it's complicated, but a lot of them have a lack of identification.
Yeah,
So it prevents them from reaching out. Some of them are dealing with
I hear that all
felony
the time.
issues.
I've got no idea.
I have no idea. Some of them are, there's the mental illness and physical illnesses that I found even a couple of days ago. A lady that was suffering from open sores on her leg, which is a byproduct of diabetes. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And just to provide them with 2 or 3 bottles of water can mean the world to them, particularly when it's 107 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
That's why
they're about a mile from the Maverick,
Of
where you were
course.
talking about.
Of course, and there's no reason, from my perspective, that this type of issue, homelessness, can't be accessed and do it in a humane way versus shoveling people around like they do. Periodically, there's confrontations with the police, and I understand that, but there's way too many people out there. You use the term 7,000. Who knows what it is?
Yeah.
That survey they do the end of January, in my estimation, is worthless. They have no idea where they are, where they're coming from, that type of thing. But that's a judgmental decision from my standpoint. But more importantly, to become affectionate towards the homeless community, caring about them. We can, talk about that all day long, but that's not going to provide any results.
Mm-mm.
Something as simple as water or food or the supply drops that Nomad does every other Sunday, I believe, is critical, but that doesn't, it's a concentrated effort, a valuable effort, but it doesn't reach out to all the homeless folks all over the area. And as I said, they're in pods now. What's that?
Those are still Band-Aid solutions.
Of course.
It's not addressing the underlying cause.
No, and it's not aggressively taking a position with homelessness. What I mean by that is, as opposed to just letting them hang on the street, hot weather, cold weather, whatever weather, is reaching out, like they did today. I think the city had some kind of an event at Liberty Park. I stumbled across it, where there was a couple of 300 homeless getting fed. There was some legal and judge personnel there, like they did a couple of days ago on the Jordan River.
Mm-hmm.
They were
cool
there,
program.
and they're making an effort to do something. You've got to give them some applause, but it doesn't touch the plurality of homeless.
Well, and another way I look at this, it's like, if we all of a sudden had 6,000 to 7,000 Ukrainians land on our shores and they were homeless, we would get our National Guard involved. We would set up a FEMA camp. We would give them food and shelter and water. But because these are American citizens who are stuck, we don't look at it at all in the same way. We just think, oh yeah, let's give them some food and water. Let's help them out a little bit. But it's just like it's almost like there's cracks in a dike, and we just want to just slowly go put our fingers in every hole. And I think we're starting to see this dike is failing, and we're starting to see this population. Just since I talked to you a couple months ago, it just seems like there's so many more homeless people on the streets.
There are.
Yeah, the
As
population.
simple as that. There are, and the police, I don't know if they're understaffed or not anymore, but I've had at one abatement a bit of a confrontation when I had to demand the police to go take a look at this one gentleman who had suicidal ideations. And they kind of looked at me. I said, and I pointed out very in a pointed way, it's their responsibility if somebody is actually presenting that. And they finally went over, two of them, with another one standing guard. I don't get that mentality. And talked to the gentleman, and eventually he was taken in to one of the, not shelters, but one of the facilities that can handle suicide.
Mental health facilities.
Yeah, and you know, Richard, it's not easy because the whole homeless scene has been not curtailed effectively really anywhere. Maybe Austin, Texas, with the little houses and things, but and they're doing the outside village, outside academy, is trying to move forward with that, but it'll affect in the first year or two, not that many people. The question is, what do you do with this huge influx? I call them human beings. This is a humanitarian crisis. It needs help now. It's not a matter of the city or the state or the county throwing money, which is, you know, I'm not sure it's accounted for, but it takes somebody to get off there, you know what, and engage, create some kind of an environment, whether it's huge tents that have a level of control, that have porta potties, that have where the people can be responsible to themselves and their neighbor. It's a short-term fix, but you know, you go to Seattle, to Portland, Chicago. I've been there. I've been to all these places.
Yeah.
And Chicago has done all right considering, but you know, Seattle is an F.
Yeah.
Salt Lake City is an F.
Yeah.
Legislative
Portland
attempts
is awful too.
Well, and Portland's awful, and L.A. they've had some people trying to create some legislation that would really handcuff the homeless, like a law that says there could be no homeless within 500 feet of a school. You know, I don't think it passed the city council, but they tried.
It's such a tricky issue because, on the one hand, you have people who are unsheltered, who don't want to go to resource centers. The resource centers are full as it is, but a lot of them are very dangerous, hesitant, and also afraid of going to those places. And like Stacy Johnson got her face all bitten up for very good reason. And you have all these people outside camping, and they're starting to really impact small business owners' abilities to do their business. People are starting to feel afraid to go downtown. People are starting to feel like, oh, if I go downtown, I'm going to be accosted as if I'm in San Francisco now, in Salt Lake City.
Right.
And so I think the state leaders, they're not looking at the whole picture in terms of the economics, because how many business owners, first of all, are moving out of downtown because of the homeless situation, right, and how many Salt Lake City residents no longer want to go there because they're afraid. And that, ignoring that part of the puzzle, I think is what our political leaders are doing, because they tore down that road home, and every single homeless person, long-term homeless person I've talked to, said that road home was their safeguard. Right. That was their sanctuary. They could get safe in there. They could get shelter. They could get what they needed. They bulldozed that down, had 1,000 beds,
and sold it.
Yeah, and sold it to a developer. And so now there's this just empty lot And a guy I talked to the other day I'm gonna show the clip a little later on. He's been homeless for 11 years, and he said even now that's gone, he and a bunch of other guys just sleep next to that empty lot.
And that's what I saw today. By the way, an update, there is construction on that lot now. They're pouring cement, and I have no idea, maybe another apartment building, just what we need, right? But there was, and you'll see the pictures later today, I'll make sure I get them to you, of a couple of hundred people, both sides of the street. I stopped right in the middle, opened up the back of my car with cases and cases of water. And, I sit there and announce to them, and they come up, and I remember some of them, but the new faces. But everybody gets not just a bottle of water. I try to give them 2 or 3 to make sure they've got some support, at least through the next day. I'll be loaded up tomorrow, even though I don't have a lot of time. But if I can get in for an hour down there somewhere, there's people all over now, not just concentrated, but in these pods that I talked about, all over downtown.
Do you think an emergency session of the state legislature for Utah is in order at this point?
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that, but I think I've talked to enough people, and people that I'm really proud to be associated with, like Steve Eliason, who's done all of that work for mental health and suicide. Galen Benyon, she's aware of it. But, they had these other political pyramids they have to climb. Well, my position, in a rather judgmental way, is this is a humanitarian crisis. It has been. And I always refer to it as a humanitarian crisis.
Yeah.
Now it's September 9th or 10th, whatever it is, and there's some cooler weather arriving. Winter's going to be here, folks, and cold weather in a couple of months. Are they going to send them, make the Ramada Inn, which is a huge dump, shovel people in there, in by 11, out at 7, in these huge meeting rooms with cots, male here, female here? That's not the answer. That's eyewash, what Aaron's doing, or whoever's making that decision. It's eyewash. What's to prevent Utah, with quite candidly all the money they have, all the benefactors, to do something that could really be a benchmark for the country and parts of the world? I've seen the homeless in Australia, parts of Europe, and it's essentially the same thing, maybe for some different reasons, I don't know. But here, there's such a high concentration.
Have you talked to political leaders? Do you get the sense at all like they might be afraid that if, again, we really try to get a handle on the situation like we maybe did in 2015, we had some of the lowest rates of chronic homeless people and got all that national coverage for it. Do you think that maybe they're afraid if we do such a great job again, we'll get flooded with more homeless people?
No, I don't. I don't think that's necessarily the case, Richard. But I must tell you, I really don't know what the result might be.
I'm just trying to figure out what are they thinking.
But the legislators, the people on the Hill, senators, whatever, representatives, I've talked to a lot of them, and communicate constantly of what's going on. Like when MJ was murdered by the police, okay? Yeah. And in a lot of cases, it becomes such a political adventure for them, and not a good adventure. They are hesitant to really hop on board.
What do you mean political adventure?
Because of the idea of going after, police, not just legislatively, but legally. Mm-hmm. And for them to get involved and say enough is enough. MJ was murdered. There's other people along the way that have been murdered. Mm-hmm. We can't let this continue.
So they're not. Let's get into that a little bit. With the time we have left, we got about 7 minutes left. Mm-hmm. So MJ, I've got the story up on my screen. She said before the police started to detain her, "I don't want to die." And prior to that, she was brandishing an iron, and she was she was on drugs, right?
Yeah,
Meth. It was the middle of the night. I think it was 2:30 in the morning or something like that.
Correct.
3:30 a.m. on January 11th. She was walking in circles carrying a piece of rebar at the intersection of 400 West, 900 North. And so this off-duty officer was working a job at the refinery. But then you watch the body cam footage. We'll play this silently in the background. The officers arrive to the scene, and she's not cooperating. They get her on the ground really quickly, and she's screaming. She's not really resisting arrest, but
she didn't want to give them her name.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That was her biggest problem. They were getting, I think they were getting rude and overly upset about that fact that they didn't want to.
Right.
She just didn't want to give her name, and so they take her from a kneeling position down to a lying down position
On her stomach.
And they're trying to get her down and get her handcuffed, and they have to use a knife to break her backpack, and she's saying, "Don't ruin my backpack." She's resisting that. Then once she's down, she just won't agree to the ankle irons, but at that point she wasn't really doing a lot. Let me see if I can find the point.
I mean, she was being knelt upon.
Yeah, she was. This officer was kneeling on her.
Yeah.
And then she's face down. He's kneeling on her back, and they find out from the coroner's office that she died of asphyxiation. She couldn't get a breath. Did she live another 9 days or something like that?
Yeah, she was in a
respirator?
coma. And, it was such I believe there was more than one officer on top of her. There was a total of three.
Looks like there's just one from this clip.
Okay.
But there's one trying to get the ankle irons on her.
The point was that she couldn't breathe. I believe on the body cam there's some mention of that, if you will, a la George Floyd. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But what happened was that she... the coroner will have it. It's in his report what exactly happened after she dropped into a coma and eventually died. Mm-hmm. And the coroner qualified homicide by asphyxiation, murdered by asphyxiation. Now, what happens now? Well, you just can't walk away from it because it's not all Salt Lake City cops, Richard, but they're. I don't know what training is involved, what intervention procedures are defined or taught, but these three cops need to be held accountable. Mm-hmm. Will they be? Well, it remains to be seen, even though the coroner has made a statement.
So she died of anoxic brain injury due to cardiac arrest from probable methamphetamine intoxication in the setting of an altercation involving physical restraint. So the way this is worded, probable methamphetamine intoxication in the setting of an altercation involving physical restraint. So she wouldn't have died had it not been for the physical restraint, but the methamphetamine intoxication is a big part of it.
You don't know if that's the primary contributing factor to her death. That was the contributing factor to her behavior at the time. But more importantly, the asphyxiation restraint and what went into that, ultimately what was declared the cause for death.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple.
Well, I mean, I got to look at both sides of this.
I understand.
I can't imagine a more difficult job than being a police officer, especially trying to deal with drug addicts who are going crazy.
I agree.
I really can't imagine a harder job because you don't want to kill these people. You want to get them into a safe place where they can detox. And
remember, MJ was, I'm sorry to say, a very high profile, a homeless individual working with many of her homeless colleagues on the street.
Yeah, it seems like I've seen her before.
Helping. And she worked quite a bit with Nomad and Kasanya and intervening with some of the folks that are coming off the street. It's just, she had a slip or whatever they call it in that world. And it's unfortunate, but she was an engaging, smart lady.
Really?
Oh yeah, and I talked to her many times about politics, about Ruth Ginsburg, and about photography, which she was very, very talented at. But the point is that she's gone now. She's buried somewhere back in Kansas.
Yeah.
And the concern that's been raised is accountability or lack of accountability. Number one. But number two, let's go back to the original discussion. There's a lot of potential of having this happen again out there, and to really step in and be aggressive with each one of these. Each one is a human being. Is it going to take an effort? Huge effort.
And I think the main takeaway should be, let's look at our protocol and how do we minimize the risk of death? Because I wonder, the way they were kneeling on her, she couldn't get the breath that contributed to her heart attack. What would be the chance of death if they just would have tased her and put the handcuffs and the ankle irons on her?
Right.
Like if that's a less probable cause of leading to someone's death, then just do that instead. Figure out the
an
least
alternative
harmful
method.
Yeah.
And obviously they didn't. They responded. Well, we can say inappropriately. The coroner can say inappropriately, but the question now is, from a legal standpoint, it's going to be evaluated by Sim and his colleagues over there at the state's attorney's office. Meanwhile, there's, as you know, in the next couple of days, there's going to be a huge demonstration to support, obviously, and to remember MJ, but to support the ending of the police brutality, which has become a watchword the last couple of 3 years.
Yeah, and I'm going to say something that's probably going to be pretty unpopular, but this defunding of the police in the major cities and the attrition that the police forces are having, I think it's really terrible, because we need more police, and we especially need those good cops. And it seems to me that if they're not attracting these, really good people who really want to work in the interest of the public safety, and instead they're scraping the bottom of the barrel,
exactly,
we're in big trouble, because obviously criminal justice, safety, the good of the public, especially the homeless community, the most vulnerable, it's so dependent on having good cops.
I agree with you 150%. I also need to share with you, as a paramedic back in Chicago, or not in the city, but the suburbs, I worked with police in Winnetka, Northfield, Glenview, the suburbs, all the time. And I had nothing but respect and admiration for what they did as police officers, but also they engaged with situations of accidents, drunk drivers, the whole thing. We worked together.
Yeah.
And how it's set up now, that's another subject that I could, touch on, but I don't want to be demeaning to the fire department or to Gold Cross Ambulance or anybody like that. But if they had that kind of civility, police, if they had that kind of civility, it would be a whole different world. But you're talking about the quality.
And there's something that's happened, like a cultural shift or something, where I used to see on the back of police cars,
serve and protect.
To protect and serve. You know what I just saw on the back of Cottonwood Heights police car? It said, solve the problem. Not we will solve the problem or let's help solve the problem. It just said, solve the problem. My wife got a picture of it, and I'm like,
what's that mean?
What does that mean? That does not make any sense. Like, that sounds like you want me to solve the problem instead, so you don't have to come to my house.
Exactly.
It just was bizarre. But when I was a kid, Officer Friendly came to my classroom, and he said, and it really made me feel much better about the police, knowing this guy, super friendly guy, loved kids. I remember seeing him a lot of times growing up and thinking, wow, that looks like a cool job. And then to see how police are just treated like a lot of these like we assume so many of them just want to be thugs, and that's just not.
You know,
not the
it's
case.
really, you know, that we're not talking Uvalde here. We're talking Salt Lake City. But
Yeah.
I always reflect on the many times that I worked with police. But the one time myself and a cop in Northfield, Illinois, pulled a lady out of a house that was on fire. And we did it together as a team. Had he not been there or I not been there, she probably wouldn't have made it. But we were able to get her out, save her life. And Tony is his name. I always throw my love and admiration towards cops when I see that they have that capability to behave in a responsible, loving, hopeful way as opposed to bullies.
Yeah, and be able to accept when they make a mistake, some criticism, and how do we do better next time?
Yeah, exactly. Collectively.
Because I don't think anybody wants to create a lynch mob for cops. We just want to solve the problem. We want to know there's not going to be more homeless people killed like this woman was.
You know, it's interesting, and to share with you, my 7 years plus that I've been here, I've really developed some great relationships with some of the highway patrol cops on a first name basis. Wow. Kind of a different breed. I hate to, be judgmental by department or by level of servitude. But I've never had that. There's a couple of Salt Lake City cops I've gotten to know, and in a different level, in a friendship level. But right now we got, that's part of the challenge for the homeless community resolution is to get over this stereotype that you just mentioned.
Yeah,
and get them engaged.
And I think unfortunately the abatement I attended, it seemed kind of adversarial with the press. They wanted me gone, you gone, everybody with a camera out of there, everybody without a camera. And I'm like, hey, I'm here just documenting what's going on. I know we're on the same team. You want to solve the problem, we want to. I'm not making you into the bad guy. But it wasn't a friendly interaction.
No, and the last abatement that I was in about a month ago, I was there, I was notified. It got to the point where the police were really trying to keep me away from capturing images of essentially people doing nothing, the health department folks that they had there standing around, the police just standing around, and the tractors and the dump trucks doing their thing, while the homeless people are scrambling to gather a tent, their personal belongings, whatever they can do.
Yeah,
it's you've seen the pictures.
It's horrific. And why can't we share those images with the public? Why are they actively trying to prevent us from sharing?
Well, they did
images?
with me. The first thing
I felt like they did with me because the shot I wanted was, of course, the money shot, the front end loader coming, and in the foreground a homeless couple scurrying to get all their things going while this big front end loader is coming. I wanted that shot. And the guy, nope, you get out of here. You're in the way. You're going to get run over.
It's a safety issue.
Yeah.
And then they started putting their yellow ribbon up, which is a symbolic gesture to create either a crime scene or some kind of a scene they need to keep people out of.
Yeah.
But, all you do, in my case, is go around the other end and walk back in again. And they don't know any better. It's just, it's a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, it's really is a big mess.
Unreal.
Yeah, we'll take a little break now, and if anybody has any questions, I'll leave Robin over the break to answer them, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Welcome back, everybody. I'm with Robin Pendergrast, who is a New York Times photographer. We're talking about the homeless situation in downtown Salt Lake City. And I'm about to show a little mini documentary about people who are stuck. But I wanted to ask you, Robin, like from your experiences, we're seeing more faces, more people on the streets. Is there a primary reason why people are stuck? And what would be, if so, what would be the best solution to get more people off the streets in the short term?
That's a real difficult question. Everybody you talk to, and I've talked to all of them like I did today, they've got different stories and they're in different situations. Being homeless can be a byproduct of losing a job. I've talked to folks, a licensed attorney in the state of Utah, and his mother that he had a car, and it just so happens that he had run out of money, and his mother, 80 years old, was she didn't belong on the street, and he desperately was trying to get her into a shelter, and they stopped by the one on 700 South, and he walked in, he was there 5 minutes and walked out. It was a nightmare. It was out of control. So you've got an attorney. This gentleman that I met about 2 weeks ago who has a degree in geology from Montana State University, brilliant guy. And he was the one, he took me up to the mountain and was showing me all the valuable rock components, including gold that exists up there.
Wow.
And he was explaining it to me, and he showed me where. This is, his name is Monk. Mm-hmm. Fabulous guy, smart. And he lives part of the time up in the mountain in one of the caves.
Wow.
And part of it, he lives in an apartment, but he has a tendency to want to stay because he really coined the term roofless, R-O-O-F, less, mm-hmm. or homeless, houseless. That's what he calls it, houseless, mm-hmm. which is a statement of preference for him.
But you cannot put any kind of, you can't even say what is the most common reason people are stuck that you're running in.
It's tough,
Yeah, it's just too, because I think more than a homeless crisis, I was talking to my wife about this, we have a mental health crisis and a drug epidemic. Those two things together are causing people to be homeless primarily. And then you're finding, in this clip I'm about to play, you're finding even if you solve the problem of putting a roof over somebody's head, they still can very much feel homeless.
Absolutely.
And that's going to be the comment from the last gentleman you hear from. But let's go ahead and start this clip. Let me know when you're ready, Troy. All right.
Trip from Mont Diego High School, and they came on a field trip just to bring us.
That was this morning, and then can you open that box?
Yeah. And then they gave us.
And you don't even know who these people.
And they gave us 2 or 3 to eat.
Most days?
Oh, every day.
In Pioneer Park?
Yeah.
And you sleep somewhere else?
Not here.
Oh, you do?
Up at the shelter. Outside the shelter.
Oh, the old shelter?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
On the street.
Are the police still coming through and harassing you guys all the time?
100%. All day.
Just all day long telling you to move?
The thing was sheep, like sheep.
What you understand about this scene?
What I get is like there's a combination of people who can't afford housing, who are either on drugs.
Probably everybody out here had house.
Yeah.
They go in and out, in and out, in and out. Put them in a place, they trash it, they junk it, look just like this, and they put them up.
Yeah.
Then they get again, put them up, back and forth like this. That's all they do.
What could the city be doing to help you guys out?
Other shelters.
More shelters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like more resources like to get to work. So I'm not gonna have no way to work. So if there's like, cause like honestly, I don't have an ID.
Yep.
So if I had an ID or something, like if I could have some type of way of getting my ID more, you know.
How did you lose your ID?
I came out here with the church. It was called Elevate, and it turned out to actually be a part of a cult. So I just lost my ID because I had to go to a hotel. And one day I was just walking around, I dropped my wallet. I was headed to work, but yeah, man, honestly,
That seems like a really common problem.
Yeah.
People losing IDs.
It's true.
Most things are stolen out here every single day. Every single day, someone will have something stolen from them.
That is true.
Huh. So how long have you been out on the streets?
I've been out for like 4 to 5 months this time. I just lost my place in my job like about 4 to 5 months ago. I was working at the Southtown Mall as a shoe cleaner.
What do you try to get jobs and work?
of course.
Yeah. Have you been in housing at all in the last 13 years? You don't have family?
I was raised in the system.
Yeah. Well, that's the other big thing too. A lot of us are raised in the system.
Like foster care?
Yeah, we are.
Huh. You feel like you get a greater sense of community out here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You get to know people out here.
I think what it is for the system, whatever system they say that they have resources, whatever. Okay, a lot of us out here, majority of us out here are criminals. We have a background, and no matter they say they're here for us, they judge us for who we are. No matter where we go for help, that's like that fucking dead. Sorry, I apologize, but that's like our dead end spot, you know. So a lot of us we don't have nowhere else to go because a lot of us that's where we end up is we get stuck for.
I'm going to pause it right there because what we just heard from these young folks at the park, is quite an eclectic gathering, a motley crew. You heard two of those young guys, one guy who'd been there for 11 years, say, "Well, I was in the system my whole youth. I was in foster care," and then he said he has 13 felony convictions. He can't get into housing, can't get a job, and so he's been homeless for 11 years. And I just find that it's crazy. Can you think of anything that kid could do to get off the streets if he cannot qualify for any housing, can't get into any job because of these felonies?
Well, of course, and that's why there's an effort made by even locally to have them, I forget what the word is, when they can get them
Expunged.
And
Yeah.
they're doing that very aggressively.
Yeah.
But that's not all of them. Remember, there's 6,000 or 7,000 folks, and some people that come to these events, they'll take the lead and meet with the judge, meet with the defense attorneys, meet with all these people that have shown up. But it's a small component.
Yeah.
And
how can they look at that many felonies?
Well,
and expunge
of course
them?
not. But they're making an attempt. It's maybe more symbolic, maybe not. But they're making definitive inroads.
Mm-hmm.
It's how do we get together as a community and effectively help support the masses.
And I kind of think of it like if that kid, the black-haired kid, who says he wants to work, and then there's another gentleman who looks like he's Polynesian, who's also foster care, aged out of the system. He says that he can't get an ID. If these young people were specialists, like, oh, I'm the ID specialist. Anybody need an ID today? Want me to help you get one? Or I'm the like you said, those little legal teams that go along to Jordan River and they get felonies expunged. I think if those specialty workers were out there on the ground helping these people, rather than just giving them food, as I showed in this clip, they're getting food all day. There are so many philanthropic organizations, churches, schools coming out giving them food. I think that's super awesome, and what you do too is amazing.
Well,
and it's like, but they also, what is it that's keeping them stuck? And it's like those felonies, this record following around, this idea there's a warrant out. Somebody even tell me they got warrants, and I think that it's like who are the criminals we should be, going ahead and putting in prison, and who are those who just have possession charges?
I'll tell you that the lack of commitment to really do something, not symbolically that's being done, but do it on a large scale, gathering all these folks and finding out and setting up the physical plant. But again, I have to reflect on one individual that I just met a week ago, who I've seen on the homeless scene at some of the Nomad Alliance supply drops. Good guy. He got a job. He got a real job with a landscape contractor. It was somehow Kazani or somebody delivered the job, and here he is telling me about how he works 12 hours a day, carrying these bags of cement, enjoying every minute of it, even when it was 105. He's got a job, he's got respect, and everything going for him. But at some of the other supply drops, I've seen potential individuals that are talking with potential employees. That's a happening thing, but that's, as far as I know, one organization. Today at this event, there was nobody there looking for potential candidates for employment. There was a lot of legal support there, food support, I think some psychological support.
And was this a Nomad Alliance type?
No, the Nomad Alliance are they've had these 50 supply drops over the last 3 years, and they bring in people. They bring in different professionals. Today was more of a city thing, but it was food, and it was at Pioneer Park, and it was just, I couldn't believe when I turned the corner how many people were there. And of course, I started talking to them. I'm unloading water for them, even at this event. And, it's one simple discussion after another with some highly intelligent people. They're not all mentally hung up. They're not all physically hung up. But even then, the intervention to go in on a massive scale and do something as far as, legitimate housing, it's going to take money and it's going to take manpower, people that are dedicated.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Robin. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks for being part of the solution. Trying to get these other leaders to come on the program who are high up in the homeless arena and don't want to come on for whatever reason. I mean, we only want to be a part of the solution. And so I think that I think you definitely are, and I commend you for it.
Thank you.
All right. So we're going to take a little pause, and then we're going to show you the rest of this clip about people who are stuck. And when we come back, we're going to have Troy Mendenhall, who's going to go through some of the homeless and housing challenges that exist out there right now. So we'll see you soon. we on air?
No, we never went. We never stopped doing that. We're still alive.
So we're on air now? Okay. All right. So welcome back to Utah Story Show. So what we're going to do is show you another clip of people who are stuck. These older gentlemen, I met Michael. I just released a story about him yesterday. Michael, I met him when I was at the Road Home office, their central office on Main Street in downtown Salt Lake City. And he was coming out of there saying he's just lost all his housing. He's lost his permanent supportive housing, his Housing First unit. And I said, tell me more. I'm a reporter. And he started telling me his story that he was evicted from Grace Mary Manor. Started telling me all these names of people who had abused him or persecuted him. He's a Jewish man, and he's actually very articulate, very passionate about his Jewish faith. But he said some kind of ridiculous things. For example, like they'd have a barbecue and they wouldn't serve him kosher food. And I said, well, were they serving like vegan food to the vegans? And they were like, no. And I was like, well, some barbecues don't have dietary, guidelines. And so it was like he just had a litany of complaints. And then I realized this guy is probably suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. He believes everybody's after him. Everybody wants to see him fail. He's persecuted by everyone. A very kind of sad case. I'm going to play that clip, and then play a clip also from his friend named is it Roger or Robert? I think it's Robert. But I'm going to start that clip, and then we're going to talk about it after it's over. You ready for that? You first moved in.
And then once Shelley Peterson made the comment that I freely gave up my bed and the lie that I freely gave up my microwave, these are all lies. Then as long as she was property manager, I couldn't pay my share of the rent. She said something so outrageous and inflammatory as that. The fact is, I was given a non-kosher microwave, and it was a junkyard microwave. And I was given an inferior bed, which they replaced with one heavily infected with mold. Heavily infected with mold. And the standard is to give a brand new quality bed, but not for me. And it's been hell having to provide my own sleeping surface close to the floor. If I try to stand up with the dresser has fallen on me, and I've been pinned to the floor, and nobody comes to the rescue. It's taken me a long time to get up, and I get injuries having to get on my feet from such a low level close to the floor. And this is not acceptable, and it is not their standard procedure. And I was never given a chance to appeal the eviction within the Grace Mary Manor Housing Connect system. There was never a discussion with anybody.
They also said you were supposed to have a case manager.
But this is a lie. What they do is it's a fake jobs for females program. And the so-called case manager, they get the government money and they never actually help me. Each one that they have claimed as my case manager is a name that doesn't do any work.
Hit job against Grace Mary Manor. I know that everybody who works in homeless services has altruistic reasons. They only want to help. And I think a lot of what he said directed at that place, you can take with the knowledge that this guy clearly has a mental disorder. He attacked me as well. Like he started to say I was out to, do harm to him or something like that. And so it's like, here we have all these people out on the street, sitting on sidewalks, doing drugs. This is Main Street. I've got it frozen on my screen right now. You've got businesses right behind these people. First of all, I want to introduce Troy Mendenhall joining me on the program today. Troy's been behind the camera for a couple episodes now. Thanks for joining me, Troy.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So what do you make of all this? Like, what do you think should be done, especially when you have homeless people camping out on Main Street?
That's a hard question. First, I want to say I'm no expert, right? I'm not an expert on homelessness, and I definitely don't want to go out and tell somebody else how they should do their job, right? Like I understand the mayor and everybody that are involved have a lot on their plate, and they have a lot they have to do. So I won't criticize, and I won't even try to say what people should do in terms of if they're in a position where they can help, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to homelessness, I think overall I would say that maybe as a society, as everyday people like yourself, like myself, everyone, maybe just have a little more compassion. I think that a little more compassion would go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that when you talk about homelessness, you and Robin were just talking about this, that nobody wants to be there. Like all of those people who are living in tents under freeways, nobody wants to be there, right? And that's one of the hardest realities to when you look at it, is that nobody wants to be there, but they are there.
Yeah.
And how do we fix that? Well, I think if more people get involved, maybe a solution can be found.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you look at these 5 people here right in front of a bank. It's frozen on my screen right now, so I'm looking at it. And you think, what the hell are they doing? They're just sitting there. They're smoking cigarettes. Some of them are smoking spice. And then as you find out, as I found out, you dig deeper, these people are constantly being harassed every place they go. And of course, they don't want that. Nobody wants that. And here's a cop right now. This is as I was pedaling past on my bike. He's telling them, guys, what are you doing here? You can't be here. You can't stay. And I think you're absolutely right. What's lacking is compassion. What's lacking is, you heard from the previous people we talked to. This woman said, everybody comes here who says they want to help. They just start judging me because I have these felony convictions, because I have these drug charges, these possession charges, and they don't feel like when anybody is like condescending toward another person, they don't feel like they're really getting help from somebody. You've got to learn to figure out how to be on the same level and know anybody can end up homeless. It doesn't matter how smart you are or how much money you have. Any person living in this world can have a series of catastrophes happen and then find themselves homeless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it just takes one bad day, right?
Yeah,
maybe 2, I don't know, but depending on where you're at, it just takes one bad day and you could be right there with them. And like I said, not a lot of the people that are homeless, they're not there by choice. They're either suffering from economic situations where they may have been priced out of the market, right? They may have mental illness, or even like the gentleman that you showed last week, where there was that abatement where they were packing up everything they had, right, in their RV, right? Mm-hmm. And even through all that, he was just super grateful and just super kind about towards the city, towards the mayor, for letting them be there as long as they were. And then you realize that his wife was suffering from a physical medical condition. Nothing they can do about that, right? So yeah,
and it's I think it's just it should be all of our problems. It should not be, this is the police's problem, this is the health department's problem, this is the mayor's problem, it's the homeless services problems who we all pay taxes to. I think we have to accept this is all of our problem. We have to accept that it's not something we can just look at on the side of the road and be like, oh yeah, it's not my problem where I'm paying taxes. These people are getting the help from my taxes. I think if like what more people were doing, like what Robin's doing, actually finding ways to give these people water, give them supplies, engage the public leadership into showing this is just totally untenable solution, obviously that could make a huge difference.
Well, and the fact that we're trying to talk about a solution in the first place means that it hasn't really been found, right? In the sense that, you know, people can say, I'm giving my money to this organization or donating here, and that makes me feel good enough, right? Like, that's great. I don't want to discount that, but at the same time, a solution still hasn't been found. We still have homelessness.
Well, I think that there are solutions though, because what Carol Hollowell is doing, it's like the antithesis of a resource center, because everybody comes in and they're accepted as a member of the community, instead of everybody comes in and feels like a prisoner, as they do in the current homeless resource centers. I think obviously her model is superior to the other model where people say they're feeling like prisoners. And then having Samuel Grenny on the program talking about the tiny home communities, I feel like that is a absolutely viable, great solution.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's just going so incredibly slow. It's like Mayor Mendenhall said she wanted to have that implemented not long after she was in office. And I put March 2021, I think it was even earlier than that. She said, let's do this. And now we are like almost 2 years later, and we still haven't broken ground. I just think there's just has to be a stronger public will to make it happen.
And you know, and you want to think about short-term solutions and also long-term solutions. The gentleman in the video you just played said he wants to work, right? Having a job and being able to work could be that long-term solution where he could find his home that he could be in for years and years, right? And these smaller homes could potentially be more of the short-term solution of being, hey, let's put you here while you are trying to get back on your feet, while you're looking for a job, while you're trying to get IDs. That we just had seen that people are needing some solutions and needing some help with these solutions. You have these short-term solutions, and for whatever reason, there's a roadblock. And I mean, I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great opportunity to, you know, push that forward and just see if it helps, you know?
Yeah. All right, I'm going to play the rest of this clip now, and you're going to hear from, I'm almost positive it's Robert, and he talk about his, the reasons why he's stuck.
Just because somebody comes off the street, it doesn't mean they lose that sense of being homeless. They still hoard. They still take their backpacks with them wherever they go. There's always something they have to keep with them, because when you're homeless, nothing's safe. But you get housing and nothing changes, because it becomes a mindset. And I've been homeless off and off for 10 years. I can't relate to people who have never been homeless. Even I consider myself I'm still homeless, because I don't have a home. I have an apartment I live in, but it's not my home. I don't have neighbors, I don't have friends, I don't have just any kind of social life. It's just like being homeless again.
So when you're under the care of the government, you don't consider yourself independent?
Oh, no.
Very interesting. He's one of the residents at Grace Mary Manor. He's friends with Michael, who was kicked out, the guy you saw before that. And, you know, he said at the beginning of that clip, even though I'm in an apartment, even though I have a roof over my head, I still consider myself homeless, because I'm completely at the mercy of the government officials or the people running Grace Mary Manor, who have all the power and in which I have no power. And he said a lot of these homeless people take with them all of their problems, their drug addiction, their alcohol, everything, and a lot of the ones who are hoarders, they still hoard. And he's like, I still am a homeless guy. I just live in an apartment. And then I asked him actually later, well, what would you prefer? We'd probably rather be in this apartment than the homeless shelter that was downtown. He's like, no, I'd rather be in that shelter because I felt like I had more freedom. He said he can't go grocery shopping because he doesn't have a transportation and he doesn't have enough money to buy a Trax pass. And so he's just like stuck where he can't get out of there because he doesn't earn any income, and he can't earn any income because he can't get a job because he doesn't, because he has this mental illness. I wasn't aware of what his mental illness was, but it's just like, you got to solve these ancillary problems. The primary problem we want to think is homelessness, but in reality, it seems like the drug addiction, the mental illness is way bigger of a problem than the homeless issue. Do you agree with that, Troy?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, I was just thinking about when you were talking last week about when you were in Europe. Remind me the country that you were in.
Bosnia.
Croatia. Yeah. And when you were talking about that, and then our discussion afterward was, you have the income of a lot of the poor Bosnians, right, that are living and they're happy and they have something that belongs to them. You know, they have their home, but they make less than what somebody could make at minimum wage here in America, right, or here in Utah.
Yeah, way less.
Less. And a lot of jobs are actually paying more than minimum wage as well. You know, like minimum wage I think is still $7.25. And then, but you know, you can get a job making 12, 15, you know, in different places. But the point that I'm trying to make is that you can make more on minimum wage here in America than someone, and be homeless than someone in Bosnia who is living off of their land. You know, they're farming. But the difference, I think, is that they have a place to call their own. You know, they have something that belongs to them. This gentleman that you were talking about in the video, he has an apartment, but he doesn't have access to the amenities that he needs, including, like you said, groceries, but possibly even mental health coverage, transportation. He might have an apartment, but does he really have a place to call his own?
Yeah.
These people who are living in RVs and tents, like they belong to them, but they're just there. They're not in a place that they call their own. They're not in a place where they are paying rent to a landlord or mortgage to a bank. They're just on their own.
Yeah, and I think that is so fundamental, because when I think it's about 14, 15 years ago, I was looking into just apathy. Why do people not give a shit about their community where they live? Like, what is this general sense of apathy? Like, oh, city council meeting, yeah, right, I'm gonna go to one of those, because that was the general sentiment when we lived in Sugar House and they were tearing down the historic block there. We're gonna replace it with corporate retail and high-end apartments, and you see that in suburbia. You see corporate retail, chain stores everywhere, and people don't have a sense of place or ownership over a community anymore. And I think that Samuel Grenny and I talked about that 2 weeks ago. If you don't have any ownership over the place where you're living, if you don't have any sense of community in the place where you're living, of course it's not going to feel like home, and you're going to feel homeless. Yeah. And I think that I talk to a lot of homeless people, and a lot of them are super anti-capitalists. I mean, they just think capitalism is what's to blame. I don't see it that way at all. I think what's to blame, crony capitalism takes over communities. They whitewash and homogenize everything so that everything is bland and boring, and you don't see enough local business, you don't see enough ownership over any little piece of the retail shopping district, and it makes people just think, why should I care? Like, why should I care about this place, or why should I care about where do I fit here if it's all bland corporate homogenous development?
And it's a good point. And, you know, I mentioned in the beginning that, you know, I'm not an expert in mental health, but one of the first things I learned with going through mental health just learning about mental health is that one of the first things they'll tell you is that you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of anybody else. If you have children, you can't take care of those children unless you can take care of yourself. Well, as a society, our society has its own health, its own mental health, right? And so when you look at that, when we can't take care of our own here, in Utah, our own community, how can we then turn around and take care of others? Effectively, I guess. And that's the thing is we send money, we send aid to foreign countries everywhere, and that's great. Don't get me wrong, but what about the people that are living under the underpass? What about the people who with their own issues that we could maybe do a little more to help?
And it's one of these things like I try to tell people, why should I read Utah Stories, or why should I read local journalism? If you're paying attention to, I don't know, what's going on with the raids of Donald Trump, or what's going on with shipping all this money to Ukraine, the gas pipelines, whatever, you cannot make any difference in any of those issues. It's like those are so far gone from you making any impact at all. But you can make actually a difference to the downtown homeless population. It's downtown Salt Lake City. You could chime in to and get to know your city council member, or become a part of your community council. It's like, where is it that you can actually put your attention where you can actually move that needle? And I'm caught up in that. I fall victim to watching the news sometimes, and I'm just like, realize I just get pissed off and I get into this hysteria. But if you look at the people in downtown and you look at what Robin's doing, he's actually making some kind of difference in the world with the attention he's paying to the homeless community.
Well, and I think you're giving a lot of by going and documenting what these people have to say. How many people are going to be putting a camera in front of homeless people, especially during an abatement, especially just in a park. You're going out there, you're putting a camera in them and giving them a voice that they otherwise wouldn't have. And then as such, you're able to then report on things that aren't able to be reported on or aren't being reported on. Case in point is this potential homeless serial killer that you mentioned, is that, most of what we have is coming from that community, and how serious are we taking the voices from that community? And that's a voice that you are giving them, but also people like Robin, people like Samuel, that are actually in the trenches trying to help. And that I think every Utah and every American could do maybe a little bit more, even myself included. I'm not trying to preach here, but to do a little bit more to just try to help.
It's not like I believe that what I'm doing is making such a huge difference, but I see that we have this platform, we have these cameras. Where should we be pointing them right now? And I see this problem is getting worse and worse and worse. Yeah. And I saw that the Tribune lost their #1 homeless reporter. She went to some journalism school. And I think that there's a niche there, and there's a coverage gap, and it's unfortunate that more media are not looking at it, are not asking these difficult questions, and I hope that people understand that we're trying to just basically provide the homeless people a voice. Because it's interesting that I look at the Salt Lake City Reddit community and I look at the Utah Reddit community. That's where we've been posting stuff. And Salt Lake City Reddit has determined that what we're doing is, or at least enough users to make them, the algorithm downgrade our content. They just think that we're doing this for flashy headlines, clicks, like clickbait, and didn't get the same response at all in the Utah Reddit community. But it's one of these things where people always assume that you've got some ulterior motive or agenda, and it's hard to get past that. But I guess that goes with almost anything.
Sounds like it goes with the territory. You'd know better than me, though. So.
Yeah, well, I think that's pretty much. That's probably a good stopping point for the show. Thanks for coming on, Troy.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And thanks for Jackie and Chris behind the scenes today, and Connie, who helps book the guests, and Golda, of course. And we've got our new burger issue out. If you can handle having this on your coffee table without drooling all over it, I suggest you go pick it up. It's our new issue of Utah Stories. We've got the 5 best burgers in Utah that you have to go try. Excellent issue. I wasn't a part of this issue much at all. It was our food writer Ted Scheffler, Amy Maxwell wrote stories, Amanda Rock, Kathy McKendrick, all these awesome local journalists we have working for us. And if you would like to support this show and support Utah Stories, go to utahstories.com, subscribe to the magazine. It's $24 for the entire year. Or go subscribe to our free digital monthly newsletter where we will send you the voice of local Utah delivered right to your inbox free of charge every single week. We never spam you, and it's free. So with that, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.